Hi, and thanks so much for tuning into another episode of TNT, the K-Cal Kids. I'm your host, Ty Justice.
And I'm Todd Fox.
And we are reviewing some of the greatest cartoons ever made, proving how great it was to grow up a millennial. Now, today we're going to start off with the K-Cal Kids Corner with the 1937 short Clock Cleaners.
Oh, yeah. An instant classic, dude, if you know this episode at all.
Absolutely. And the fun thing is, we've talked about this before, but this is a trilogy episode, meaning it has the three main characters, the Trinity, which is Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and Goofy. And we've mentioned it before, but Mickey Mouse at this point was known to be a hot commodity, but very dull. And everybody knew it. Walt knew it too. And unfortunately, you couldn't do a lot with Mickey. He couldn't be mischievous or anything. So when you had him in the same cartoon with Goofy and Donald, you could have a lot of mischief, and you could have anger through Donald, just stupidity through Goofy, getting into a lot of stuff, which and those are always the funniest. My favorites are always when it's the three of them.
Yeah, absolutely, because you mentioned before, I mean, Mickey was like the moral compass. He was like the straight shooter, the one that was always in charge. You had Goofy was a goofy sidekick, no pun intended, right. And then you, like you said, you got into hijinks with Donald, and usually bad things would happen to both of them. Mickey would sometimes catch a little flack,
right?
But for the most part, he would wind up being on top, trying to
save the day.
Exactly, be the main character.
Exactly, and it was a good one. This was their 97th Disney short, and this was, released by RKO, a Technicolor cartoon, of course. It had a lot of great things behind it, but you had Mickey Mouse as Walt Disney played Mickey Mouse, Pinto Colvig did Goofy, and Clarence Ducky Nash, of course, was Donald. And this short was really good. The animation, the fluidity of the animation, especially when they played outside the clock they were cleaning, because the short is about three clock cleaners going in to clean this huge high-rise clock. And it was massive. And they went in to go clean it, and they separated and did different things. But there are elements of this that are throwbacks to silent films, which were just around less than 10 years before that. I saw a lot of Harold Lloyd in this, especially when it came to the danger of being, Mickey Mouse specifically trying to get that stork or that bird out of the clock. There's a lot of really jarring shots of the streets below as he gets, almost knocked off by this bird. And I noticed, I go, there's a lot of Harold Lloyd elements in this that, very slapsticky, very vaudevillian movement in Mickey Mouse when he's doing this. And it's actually really interesting. It's a very visually stunning short.
Yeah, high risk, danger too, I would say. I would throw in Buster Keaton.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, so I mentioned it before, I think on a previous episode, where Goofy kind of walks out on that limb. He's trying to, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but getting to your architecture or the drawings. Like my dad noticed that even with his bad eyesight, he's like, "There's a trolley down there." like you could, because my dad loves trains and trolleys, and they perfectly, encapsulated probably what downtown Los Angeles or downtown New York looked like.
Right.
So you had the cable car going down the street, you had people, you had the honking, the horns. So they did a lot of little things that you most likely any other studio back in the day would feel, oh, that doesn't need to be in the cartoon.
Right.
But that added to, like you said, the high rise, the high stakes of it all.
Right. No, it's true. And it just makes it a very fun short. And there's a little controversy with this one that kind of surprised me as well.
Yeah, you brought that up.
Yeah,
I didn't even know about that.
Off screen, we talked about this in the 90s when these were put out on tape and Laserdisc, I assume. There was a part of this that was actually banned, because there was, I think, a Methodist minister, and I think he was associated with the American Family Association, successfully campaigned for Walmart to stop selling the VHS tape cartoon classics Fun on the Job! ! Because of perceived instances of foul language. So when Donald is in the mainspring of the clock, and it says, "Do not, disturb," but he disturbs it, and he unspools the whole thing, and then eventually throughout the short keeps trying to knock back the spool to its previous positioning. One coil keeps coming up, and it becomes his adversary, and he would yell at it, and his voice would echo back through the coil, and they thought he was saying, "F you, yes, OB," and for a Disney short, especially of that time, that was impossible. That never would have happened. But, when people complain sometimes hard enough, it doesn't matter if it makes sense or not, it'll be censored. And it was changed to Is That So, I think, or I think originally was Is That So, and then followed by gibberish. So you can find the original short on YouTube. There are YouTubers that wonderfully stitch together the different versions, the original version and the edited version and the less edited version, because it's still edited today on Disney Plus. Because I checked, of course, because I'm neurotic that way. And I also checked the Disney Archive, Disney Treasures DVD that has that short on that, and that one is edited as well. And Wikipedia said that there was a Alice in Wonderland short, the Masterpiece Edition, that had the short on there unedited, which was a lie. So I picked that up for like $1, or $2, but it didn't have it on there. So I was like on the trail of this original version of the short because I'm a little obsessive compulsive like that.
You wanted to double check, right?
That's right. And fortunately, it's online so you can find it. But yeah, this was actually a successful banning of this episode kind of until it was reworked, and it was completely and utterly unnecessary.
Yeah, I think it was much to do about nothing, as my mom used to say. It just, to me, if you listen to it carefully, there's nothing said there. And like you said, you want to think about how strict things are today when they want to cancel something. Imagine back then when there's only limited things out there, and then this would have hit the theaters. I mean, parents would have been like putting their hands over their kids' ears and then just storming out upset. So
setting the theater on fire.
Pretty much. So like with this adaptation of it, like I think, like you said, like I said, it's much to do about nothing. The cartoon itself, that part is probably one of the funniest parts in there.
Stupid.
Takes away from the whole experience.
It's a small thing, but I am of the mind that, if you're going to release something, release it fully restored and uncut.
Yeah.
Especially if there are stupid reasons why it was edited in the first place.
And here's the thing with this episode, every time you watch one of these awesome Disney classics, you kind of pick up on something new. And I had something new before I watched it again before we did this episode this time. And that is, I had something I was going to talk about before. Now this time I'm thinking to myself, what kind of place that has to be like some sort of church or some sort of like bank, and they have to have money. Why are they hiring these three goofballs that have literally a wet mop? Like they don't have any sophisticated, even for that time, cleaning material. That's what was bugging me. I'm like, wait a minute, these guys got patches on their pants and
like the patches on the tires on their cars.
Yeah. It's like how did they hire? I mean, did they find Mickey, Donald, and Goofy at Home Depot? I mean, what's going on?
I was gonna go somewhere with that, but
I'm just saying.
I get what you mean. And I mean, that's just the conceit of the cartoon, I guess.
Yeah.
And also, some of these institutions with the clocks in the churches were so old by then, by the 30s, some of them were hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
And, the funny thing about constructing towns back in like the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries is that the church, it's why they had steeples, had to be taller than any other building in the town square to show that it was the most important part of the city.
Yeah, prominent spot.
Yeah, so that's why like churches were always the tallest buildings in the city, so you could find it, and so it would show that you valued God over anything else. Then banks got bigger, and well, we all know what that means. But
then that's a God itself, right?
Exactly.
the God of money.
The God of money. Greed, avarice. But
my favorite color is green.
Right? But that was a great short. You had a lot of fluidity with the movement, especially when you see Goofy and Mickey. Now Donald as well, but with Donald, he was confined to more or less one place. Goofy was moving around. There was a portion of the short where he's between the bells. He's in the bells, and then he's cleaning the bells, and it's time, and then the figures come out on a track and hit it, and he just, is of course shook up.
He's in the bell.
He's in the bell when they do it, and it keeps going, and then of course the figures move away by the time he comes to, and he's like, what's going on here? And he just kind of gets real suspicious. But the fluidity of movement in his body and just that kind of almost rubbery, the rubbery reaction he has is kind of fantastic.
Because the thing that sticks in my head is when he sings a song, and he's like,
"Wow, rings the bell,
the altar ring," is like, bing, and I think his head rings. And then I threw it in the different languages on the DVD.
Oh.
So in French, he's like, I was dying, dude.
And I love how in that, when he starts to get suspicious and he starts moving the eyebrows, he starts singing it suspiciously as well.
Yeah.
Wow, with the bells in the old tower rings. And then he peeks out to see who's going to hit. And then once he's satisfied, he gets back and the bell starts singing, in the old tower, gong. And it comes out again right on time. That was hilarious. But I noticed specifically with Mickey because he's outside the tower on these
catwalks,
yeah, and these ladders, and it's just one of these things where
Scaffolding.
he's scaffolding. He's almost falling to his death every time, and because he's trying to get rid of this big bird that's in the clock. He made a nest in there, but the bird's not having it. But watching him move and his movements between these objects was so beautiful to see. The fluidity of it, like I keep saying.
I think that one stunning view when he's flying out, he throws a bird, but he's stuck to the bird, and it kind of comes back. Mm-hmm. That's visually amazing for that time period. Oh, yeah. And one other thing I'll add is when he's trying to save Goofy, and the rope runs out, and then Mickey's like, oh, my God. You could feel like, I think he just dropped to his death.
I just killed my friend.
Yeah, you could feel it, and then he hits the flagpole and pops back up. But dude, Mickey for the first time that I saw up until that time, probably he's like, oh crap, that was real emotion.
Yeah, they were getting good at that too. Yeah, and that's what Mickey was good at too, is just that commiseration. He became the audience in that instance. Yeah, and I think a lot of these cartoons, it's basically Mickey's POV. We're kind of seeing it through his emotions because he's the most, I guess, human, and he's the most normal because he couldn't be terribly extreme in any which way. Mm-hmm. So he becomes the audience in that way. So he would react the way an audience member would react in that same position, which is funny. And of course, the ending, the clock tower wins because the clock is the enemy. That's the antagonist in this. Yeah. So they are the protagonists, and of course, the bird, but the clock itself, the clock tower itself, is the antagonist of this short. It's an inanimate object. It doesn't have eyes, but they just can't seem to win. And by the end, they get caught in its gears, and they start moving mechanically in a certain way, and then they start adopting the movements of the gears to show that they have lost. Yeah. But it was a fun short. It's a lot of action, and again, visually the artists were growing and getting better at movement. And after a while, you keep doing these shorts. If you're a good artist, which the Disney artists, the 9 old men, 10 old men, including Art Babbitt, I always like to throw him in there because he was terrific and part of these crews. They were getting very good, but you get very bored doing the same thing over and over again.
That's true.
And you think, like with Disney, like, oh, well, it's magic every time. But, these guys were just young, hungry artists, and they were getting better. And they were commercial artists, some of them, before they got to Disney. So by the time they got there, doing these things, and they were being trained in this style, it's fun, but you want to go a little crazy. You want to experiment a little bit. And that's why some of these shorts, before the war started, really started to get out there and really experimental with some of the movement and some of the perspectives they were doing or using and implementing, and it was a lot of fun, and you can see that in their work.
You can kind of imagine, going to your point, like they bring up the storyboards, like, okay, let's give a scenario for these three. They're clock cleaners in a high rise. All right, let's figure out what we could do, and then they start brainstorming, because the way the cartoon starts, it's just Mickey whistling, and he's brushing one of the arms on the clock, the actual clock on the outside. Yep. And it just goes from there right into action, and it's pretty cool. Like that's what you've brought up when we bring up these shorts. How there wasn't this lollygagging of story building, because they start the original scene in most of these shorts where it's self-explanatory, right? And then it just gets into the story, and you're just right there to follow. So I mean, if I were a kid in 1930s, as a Disney fan in the movie theater, I'd be captivated, because it's for a 7-minute episode or show, it's really, really good.
Yeah, and that was the magic, and that's what I always loved about old cartoons, is they had to have a beginning, middle, and end in 7 minutes. And it had to be clear, it had to be funny, it had to be sharp, and they couldn't waste any time. But I will say this for Walt. Walt was always a good... I don't want to say a guy with I don't want to say like a slave driver, but when it came to storyboards, and when it came to a lot of these, he was there for a good amount of it. Mm-hmm. And if something didn't track, he'd tell them. And he was good at organizing this stuff to where it's like, he made the dots connect, and he was very good at guiding them. And this isn't saying anything about other aspects of the working conditions there. But when it came to the story, Walt was very, very on point when it came to storytelling. He was really good. He didn't draw after like the early 20s. People think he drew for years and he liked it that way. But no, he didn't really pick up a pencil himself past the early 20s. You know, it was all his team. But he really was good at directing them into doing
Yeah,
this.
he fell into that.
Yeah, and he was, and that was actually something he was really, really talented with. He was very good at, and I give him credit for that. But that was Claw Cleaners from 1937. That's the reason why it's one of our favorites. We're going to start doing the old ones soon. So I want to start out with Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, Walt's original creation that was stolen from him and shaped the rest of his career in terms of creation and having to do deals with other studios for the rest of his life. But
well, he'd be happy to know he had the rights back to it, and today at least, you know.
They fought it, they got it back in 2006.
Yeah.
But it's the reason, and I'll explain when we start talking more about that, as to why that shaped his perspective and made him a little bitter, and understandably so when it came to the distribution of his shorts, because he didn't make a lot of money on these shorts.
Yeah.
But they were still their bread and butter. But moving on, I think we're going to move on to a new segment, the Disney block / the Disney afternoon.
I love it.
So we've decided that, you know, we're going to start breaking down, instead of just shows, each episode from these shows, and we're going to start breaking down the episodes from each of the 4 of the block that we grew up with that meant the most to us, which are going to be Ducktales, Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers, Darkwing Duck, and TailSpin.
Yes.
So we're going to start talking a little bit now about Ducktales. And this is what kind of kicked off what we recognize as the Disney block. And, you know, the second animated renaissance on television, specifically started and ignited by Disney, because there were cartoons on the air. But, you know, a lot of them were limited animation or animated out of the country. And, you know, what Disney did was it brought the magic back to American animation, or at least it brought the magic back to TV animation, and not just Saturday mornings.
Late 80s, early 90s.
1987, yeah.
Yeah, and with these, like when they hit the air and they went to like K-Cow Kids and stuff like that and hitting the block, I remember this was like the 4 o'clock episode.
Yeah.
You know, this was when it was just kicking into gear for that 2-hour block.
Right.
And there was a lot. It brings back a lot of memories. Like you could find now that, you know, we've been doing these videos like on YouTube, people have put up like the credits, and it'll be like, you know, this is what's coming up this week on the Disney block, and I'm like, dang, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
you know, so
advertisements. Yeah,
dude. So, you always saw a lot of cool toys, Super Soakers, stuff like that when we were kids growing up.
Yeah,
and
they knew what they were doing to advertise. To us,
absolutely.
But and I think because throughout the 80s as well, I want to bring this up because we're going to talk about Ninja Turtles later on. But even when it came to the Transformers and a lot of shows, they were toy-based.
Yeah.
A lot of these shows were basically half-hour toy commercials, which they got in trouble for in the 80s, and we've talked about that before. But what happened in the big turn was that they became more story-oriented. And it was more, like, again, the toys, it became more advertising-oriented. So a lot of these animated programs weren't just like toy commercials. Like well, we're going to sell a bunch of Ducktales toys and animated figures, and that's why we're going to make this episode like that. This was based, they went back to story being king.
Absolutely. Like out of the block, I would say only Darkwing Duck.
And barely.
And he had limited toy collection. But for the most, I think what they did was they capitalized on video games with the Disney block more than anything.
Yeah, because that was kind of the era as well. Because when Transformers was coming around, like they didn't have like Transformers games like in '84.
You couldn't because of what you would have to do graphics-wise.
Yeah.
It wasn't even when Nintendo rolled around. There was no Transformer video game.
No,
there was nothing like that. Even like I forget what the first video game for Transformers was. It might have been even Sega.
Yeah, maybe.
Like because I don't remember it on Super Nintendo, or maybe in the comments someone remembers, but
right.
I don't remember getting any kind of video game with Transformers. But to go to your point though, like these were stories. They did tell stories. Like this first episode, rewatching it was kind of crazy because it did have a moral compass to it.
Oh yeah.
And there's one thing I got to bring up before we do. Like, obviously, those that know DuckTales, he has a big money bank or pin or whatever.
It's money bin. Yeah. Scrooge.
And he jumps into it with the coins. I never thought about, like, the whole ramifications of coins because, obviously...
It's a solid, not a liquid.
Yeah, and I remember Family Guy.
Family Guy.
Dude, that's totally... I laughed so hard when I saw that. Because I was like, bro, that would have been hilarious if Scrooge went in there. It broke my neck.
That was so funny because as kids, who didn't think it was so cool to be able to swim through a bunch of money?
Yeah, he's through the backstroke through coins.
Through coins. When Peter Griffin hits him, he's like, it's a solid, not a liquid. What was I thinking? I'll put that graphic up. That is so funny. But yeah, that was the first thing I thought of too.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, it cracked me up. But DuckTales was based on pre-existing characters, and they did this with all their shows except for Darkwing Duck. But Darkwing Duck was an original. It was supposed to be a 007 or James Bond spinoff, but that didn't work out. But starting out, DuckTales, was about Scrooge McDuck, who had a great time swimming in his money bin, had to all of a sudden take care of his nephews because Donald Duck wanted to go back into the Navy, which is odd.
At his age, right?
At his age, but he wanted to re-enlist. So there was a bit of that. I don't know originally if Donald Duck was going to be a larger part of the series, but he's a large part of the pilot.
Yeah.
Because he's the reason the boys are there. So in this, Scrooge McDuck learns compassion because he's kind of an isolated character. He lives in his mansion with his butler, and these three kids come along and they kind of humanize him a bit. And they make him less paranoid, I've noticed as well. But you also have the Beagle Boys. You have this new character, the Sea Captain or the Captain, El Capitan. And this is part of a 5-part series. But in the original pilot episode, because a lot of these initial pilot shows were like 5 episodes long. Like I think for TailSpin, for Chippendales Rescue Rangers, for what was the other one?
Darkwing
Duck. Darkwing Duck is only 2 episodes.
Yeah.
They kind of shortened it. They're like, enough with this 5-episode arc. We're just going to do 2 episodes. But they're all multiple episodes, and they were basically a mini movie at first that launched these shows. And they were also cut up later on for to be put back into the show as episodes. So a lot of these aren't really like episode 1, 2, and 3. They would reinsert them like later on in the season or the beginning of the second season, which is kind of strange in what they did with TailSpin. But in this one, the first episode is Don't Give Up the Ship. And, I can't even imagine what it was like seeing this for the first time. I don't remember that, but seeing something that, wasn't just trying to hawk toys and explosions at you. And it was just this, beloved characters reimagined and in an ongoing weekly show. And it was cute. Not all the characters had arrived yet either. So in the first episode, if you're breaking it down by episode, I think they only introduced Huey, Dewey, and Louie, Uncle Scrooge, the Beagle Boys, the villain, the butler,
Yeah.
Duckworth.
Yeah.
But Mrs. Beakley and Webigail weren't there yet. They were going to be on later on. But this was a good one because, the way that the kids, the Huey, Dewey, and Louie got into the intrigue was that they were just kind of bored at the mansion, which they were, in awe of at first. And they're looking around in Scrooge's mansion, in his mansion, in the museum part of it. And they find this ship because Donald, of course, is in the Navy. So they're like, Uncle Donald would love this. So they take a look at it. And at the same time, we find out that the Beagle Boys are busted out of jail by some mysterious character called El Capitan, the captain. And the plot, is basically he wants them to break into Scrooge's bank, which they say they've done 299 times already. Unsuccessfully. This will be the 300th time, which is kind of, a nice round number. And their job is to get that ship that the boys have found.
Yeah, and it's supposed to have like a map or something like
Treasure
that.
map.
Yeah. So first off, before we get any further, I got it. There's a couple rumors that people have said over the years that Huey and Dewey and Louie were a ripoff of Alvin and the Chipmunks because of the colorations and, the three,
right.
Together. But I just felt like, hey, the grand uncle being Scrooge McDuck, for me, I kind of felt like that was my uncle. My uncle's well off, and he had no marriage.
Money bin.
Yeah. I mean, he basically has an offshore account. So
it's his solid, not a liquid.
Yeah, and he was this. I could relate to him because even my late mom said, when she would watch the cartoons with me, she would be like, yeah, that's your Uncle Manny. He would, a
lot of money, no people skills.
Yeah, at all.
Sorry, Manny, if you're watching.
Yeah, that'd be crazy if he was.
No, hey.
But no, it's just the whole arc of the show was pretty cool because that episode, he despises them at a point because all they're doing is causing problems. They wrapped up Duckworth and the whole nine,
to get out of there.
Yeah, it's just turning into a problem. And then you see one part of the episode early on, Huey, Dewey, and Louie are in the room, and you see all this cool stuff around them, but they're bored.
Right.
And then
kids don't care about stuff. They care about, you kind of having fun with them and doing things. You could, kids are simple when they're that young.
Yeah, and Scrooge is like, what good does Donald teach you? Or because doesn't he teach you about money? Because they didn't know the value of money.
Right.
And he's like, no, he teaches how to play baseball, how to fish, and how to do that. I thought that was really poignant. Like, it was a good point, And so they brought that out, and then as the episode goes on, he begins to realize, hey, these are not just little pains in the butts. I could like these kids
because he also said that he recognized parts of himself in them.
Yeah,
which was kind of neat. So he remembered what it was like to be that kind of a kid, and he kind of empathized with them that way, even though he was still annoyed at their presence. Mm-hmm. But then they of course tie up Duckworth to go on this adventure, and to go with Scrooge, and they get into all this mischief and mayhem, which leads to the setup for the rest of the show.
And when we get into these episodes, Ty, when we're talking, have this conversation, because we have like a vague outline, and then we just kind of like riff. But here's one I have to throw you a curveball, man.
Sure.
Like,
let me get back to Alvin and the Chipmunks. Yeah. So ask me this, and then I'm going to answer that question. I forgot.
Okay, sorry. Well, the curveball to this one is, I watched recently a thing about 80s and 90s sitcoms, the ones that failed or the ones that were like maybe branching off of other successful.
Right.
And so you have those, what is those called when they lead off into other ones? Like
Spinoff. Yeah.
Didn't these block shows feel like sitcoms in a way?
Some. In a way, God, that's a good question. I don't think they were written like sitcoms, but they definitely had a certain structure, a comedy structure in them.
Yeah, or a moral structure.
Yeah,
right?
A moral and comedy structure, because there were gags. And I would say, I think there's a common thread in how they're written in terms of sitcoms and comedies in general, especially older comedies.
Because I felt when we get to it, I think TailSpin. And I'll give you a reason why. I think that one felt like a sitcom.
Right. And Ninja Turtles kind of did too, because there's breaking the fourth wall, looking in the camera.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about that later on this episode.
Still to come. By the way, like and subscribe.
Yay! but no, there's a bit about that. I think there is a little about that, because these guys that were writing these shows were, probably comedy writers before, or sitcom writers on other shows are in the room. But to answer your previous question about Alvin and the Chipmunks, the only reason I would say that they are not necessarily a ripoff of Alvin and the Chipmunks is because Huey, Dewey, and Louie predate the Chipmunks. Because if I'm not mistaken, Bagdasarian, who created the Alvin and the Chipmunks in the 50s, I think he created them in the 50s, and Huey, Dewey, and Louie have been around since the 40s.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because I remember they did, there were some earlier cartoons with Donald Duck, Donald's nephews. I'll try to find the exact dates, but I'll look that up, because that is an interesting thing. But, maybe one was kind of a ripoff of the other, because the primary colors is kind of a dead giveaway.
Yeah, it's almost, that's why I was like, should I put some credence to this?
Maybe. I mean, it's always good to ask a question. You never know.
Yeah.
So I gotta find out
if anyone would know. Ty would.
Yeah.
So,
or somebody in the comments.
There you go. That would help too.
That we don't turn away any answers to our questions. Mm-hmm. But no, that did start out that's what started the first episode of Ducktales. And of course it ends on a cliffhanger, as it does in every preceding episode leading up to the fifth. But this is an interesting show setting up about greed and money and what's really important in your life. I think because you touched on the point about it being about morality and moral compasses or moral compass and having a message. And I think in the first episode what it's setting up is the balance of money and family, and just understanding that things don't bring happiness, but necessarily, as opposed to having a good relationship with others. And that was like kind of the first thing it started to set up. Yeah,
because the last thing I got in this episode, Ty, before we move on, is the fact that when he's so rich, but he takes like a taxi, he could barely pay the $2.
He's so cheap.
He tips him with cheese
because he gets free samples of cheese. And he took them all.
And the one and only time that they go into his vault that I can remember that people are working there.
Yeah.
Because usually I thought it was just his vault and they walk in and that's it.
Right.
But he had people working there and he treated them like crap. And then right away, the nephews were like, "Hey, come on, don't be so mean."
Yeah, they humanized him.
Yeah. There was a lot of that in the first episode.
That's interesting. All right, now we're going to talk about Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers. And of course, like DuckTales, this was a kind of like mini movie they did, mini animated movie. And it was cut up into a few different parts. And we're going to talk about the first one. The first episode was called Rescue Rangers to the Rescue, Part 1. Original.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
This one started like a sitcom to me in a way, because right away you had, Chip coming out there with his high-pitched voice complaining about Dell making a mess.
Right.
So
this is definitely an Odd Couples thing. You're right about that. That's right.
And in a previous episode when we talked about the series in general, you brought up a great point that I never thought about. Magnum P.I. being still big at the time.
Yep.
He was Dell, Dell, and Chip was, what do you call it, with a jacket?
Oh, Indiana Jones.
So they had that look about him. But they still had for the people that knew the old cartoons, they acted the same.
Yeah.
Like they had the same kind of thing, because the opening scene is that small tree that was in Donald Duck's train episode.
That's right.
And that was their kind of hangout. That was their hideout type deal.
What was that called? Built to Scale or
out of scale? Out of scale.
Out of scale. Yeah. That's the one.
Out of scale episode. But yeah, they had that tiny tree right there.
Yep.
And then, but when they went inside, it was kind of big. The thing that was surprising though, Ty, was when Monterey Jack made his appearance, because it was like there was really no introduction. He just came downstairs to be like, hey, what's all the noise?
He was a very big type character, though. He was a mouse.
Yeah.
But yeah,
twice their size.
Yeah, exactly. He's a big guy, and his big weakness, of course, was cheese. He'd go into a trance like it was catnip for a cat.
Oh, yeah.
It was,
and he had like superpowers with it, too.
Yeah. He'd be like super strong, jump through boxes or like walls.
And he had that deep Australian accent.
Yeah.
Like, don't worry about it, love. And he would tell it to Gadget all the time. The little fly, what was his name?
Zipper.
Yeah.
Zipper, that's right.
And Zipper.
Jim Cummings. That was Monterey Jack.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that voice, by the way. It was a good change up compared to the high-pitched, squeaking kind of voices of Chip and Dale.
And, I wonder if that had something to do with it, too. They're like, for this to be a show, we have to have another voice that isn't so high-pitched and kind of, cringy. Mm-hmm. Because over time, you don't think about things like that. But over time, if you listen to something that is high-pitched over and over again without anything else to like ground it, it might become a little annoying, even for kids. And, kids don't necessarily know why. They just don't like the voices. But, yeah, I think he brought a good balance to the show. Yeah. It's all because of this big plot, because the fat cat, is actually working for a scientist. I don't know if that's revealed in this episode yet, but the plan is to, go through all this to get I think the red ruby he's wearing and Fat Cat is wearing and get it, because they have some dastardly plan, but it's something that Chip and Dale kind of accidentally fall into, because this episode starts with their, I think, mentor, who's a dog, and his human counterpart in the police department retiring. So they go to this retirement thing and then stumble into intrigue after that, and then start following the clues, and they kind of get pulled into this whole thing, which eventually will lead into their career as rescue rangers. The next show we want to talk about, which is kind of interesting, is going to be TailSpin.
Yes.
And I have to say, I liked TailSpin. It wasn't my favorite of the bunch. Growing up. I mean, it was fun. My favorite character was Kit, of course.
It lasted the least amount of episodes from what I remember.
Yeah, I think it did. But Kit Cloud Kicker. Yes. I was going to say Cloud Licker, but Cloud Kicker, because he had his board, and it was like a little wedge, a little silver wedge that he would hit the button on it, and it would turn into this croissant-looking half-moon board, and he would surf the clouds.
That was cool.
But, of course, this, now, like every character so far has been based on previously created IP. TailSpin was a reimagining of Jungle Book and the Jungle Book characters, because King Louie is actually the owner of a bar in a kid's show that Baloo frequents a lot. And, Mowgli is kind of transformed into Kit. So that's like the little
essentially
bear cub kind of character.
And he's wearing 90s clothes, backwards hat, baggy shirt.
Baggy sweatshirt kind of thing, yeah. And he was very much of the era.
Very much.
Interesting thing about that show is Plunder and Lightning, the pilot episode/movie, was actually heavily edited when they cut it into episodes, and you can't really find the original one besides like VHS copies on YouTube. But that one has a lot more action in it, and there's a lot more things that were cut out, like emotional moments too. It's kind of interesting. And people online don't understand why like all that was cut, because there are a lot of good moments in there and probably cut for time, but it was chopped down quite a bit.
And that's why I thought, like, you get the rebellious on his own solo kid, fights the pirates to steal what they were looking for. They had stole it from, which you find out later because you see like a little Easter egg of the SK, Shere Khan.
Right.
Which I thought he was drawn so well in this series, where he's standing up and he's very, very much like nothing can surprise him. Like they even pull a gun on him in one of the episodes and he's like, what are you going to do with that? like he's this...
Cool as a cucumber.
Yeah. I mean, he never shows emotion whether he wins or loses. And he even gives like a sarcastic clap when he's been bested. So I thought he's a best character. I'm getting ahead of myself, but
no. We understand.
But they rob that plane, and then Kit just reappears out of nowhere, or appears out of nowhere, takes the item. He gets away. Surfs a cloud, gets on a plane with a character that you never see again because he's just there to help establish the story, get him to Baloo, like you said,
right,
and it's a pretty good start because then Baloo starts to he shows him his plane, which is a pretty cool sea duck.
Yep,
which is called
the sea duck.
The sea duck,
which is kind of a throwback to Ducktales and all that.
And did you notice the planes were kind of noirish? World War II-ish.
Oh, yeah.
The pirates.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The pirate planes.
There's very much a 1940s serial aspect to this.
Correct.
So there's a lot of that influence in this show, which is really cool. But Shere Khan, I wanted to say, originally in the Jungle Book was originally played by actor George Sanders. And George Sanders was a very suave villain all the time.
Yeah.
And he was in the original cartoon as well, the Jungle Book from '66. But in the rest of his films, he was always a very suave villain. He was just sometimes a foil for Tyrone Power, my namesake, and they always played opposite each other when they were in movies. It was very rare when they were in conjunction with one another. He was actually in Tyrone Power's last film that Ty Power died on. But so the character being very suave in this series makes sense because that was the actor, if you remember, like the original Jungle Book. So Shere Khan being that suave kind of villain, like you just can't make him sweat. That way, it makes him all that much more of a threat. It was very much a throwback to the original voice actor, a British actor named George Sanders. But that's kind of what made this show kind of fun. And they also, what was kind of an interesting aspect that kind of surprised me was they used a little bit of CGI in it. And that was more or less having to do with the flight plans of the planes and, because it wasn't a heavy CGI show. This was hand-drawn, hand-animated. Now, when it came to their TV animation, I mean, that was expensive enough because they were spending more money doing more full animation. That's what made it look so rich and fun and good, basically, and clean. So that was expensive, but then adding a little bit of like CGI tracking for the plane and all that, the sea duck and the planes when they're going through the air doing their air pirate stuff, that was an additional layer that they used, which Disney wasn't afraid to kind of go a little out with their TV shows because by that time, Ducktales and Chippendales Rescue Rangers, they were successful. So of course, they didn't mind dabbling a little bit, spending a little more money here and there if it made the show look a little better because they were reaping the benefits from those shows.
Yeah, and what I liked about this one, even though it only lasted 2 seasons, I believe 2 seasons, I liked the fact that you had, there wasn't, I don't think Shere Khan in this pilot episode yet, other than the label, but I like the fact that going onward, he either sometimes was a friend or a foe, depending on who the enemy was for that particular episode. If he wasn't the enemy, the pirates were always a bad guys. They fought them, and the town was cool. There was only one way in through that skinny, like the rocks, and then you had this beautiful like sea setting town. And then you notice about Shere Khan in later episodes, like all his men or all his stooges are either like rhinos, they're the Black Panthers,
right?
Like
African animals,
yes,
rough jungle animals.
Yes. So like, whereas the pirates were more like scruffy, like weird. Some even ostriches. Like you had the strongest of the African forest as his men, or his goons.
And there was very much a swashbuckling aspect to it of this show, especially you see that in this episode. And they had some real life kind of consequences in this because in the show, Baloo is supposed to buy the sea duck, but he doesn't do it in time. And I think it was Rebecca. She ends up buying it. And he has to work for her, and he hates that. But there's this whole back and forth that was actually a really good dynamic for these characters.
And that's where it felt like a sitcom.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden, like you have a monkey wrench thrown in there, and then so he's barely adapting to the young kid who's an orphan essentially. He's going to take him under his wing. He starts to bond with him, and all of a sudden, here comes Rebecca, who is a potential love interest or like a who's the boss type deal.
A single mom too.
Yeah, because she has a daughter.
She comes in with a kid, so it's a single mom kind of moves into town.
Yeah, the daughter annoys Kit, you know, like, and then Baloo starts getting frustrated with both of them, and so it turns into like a situation comedy almost.
No, it does. And yeah, you're right about that. And it's very interesting, but it worked. You know, it worked.
Oh, it was good.
It was very interesting. Yeah, no, I liked it. Like I said, it wasn't my favorite. I liked DuckTales and Chip and Dale a little more, but you know, I did love that show as well. It was all part of the block. You love the block of shows, the 4 shows that would be shown after school. The last one we're going to get into on this section is going to be Darkwing Duck.
Absolutely.
And that was one of my favorites because, you know, it was very Batman-esque, but again, kind of a comedy sitcom setup, like you were saying. I'm seeing it more and more. That you had
Sorry.
No. It's you know, it's true. That's the through line for a lot of these. And you know, there was breaking the fourth wall in Darkwing.
A lot.
You know, you would look to camera, like, you know, he would look before, you know, something bad happened, and you know, he was his own comic foil in a lot of ways. But you know, you had Goslin, who was a daughter, and the pilot, he goes after this girl and protects this girl whose grandfather creates this massive weapon. Terrace Bulba was the villain, who was voiced by Tim Curry.
Tim Curry, there you go.
So Tim Curry was a very big actor at this time. It's kind of funny that he would do this kids show. I mean, he was also very much into voice acting at the time because he was the original Joker in Batman the Animated Series. So he did that first, did 3 episodes, and then they replaced him with, of course, Mark Hamill, who was legendary. But he did make a good villain, a good over-the-top, you know, bull in a suit.
This is before Home Alone 2.
That's right.
Yeah.
Before he really made it. He was actually really good as this domineering bull character who wore suits, but it was kind of a businessman, kind of, you know, Lex Luthor type billionaire villain. But in this one, you know, Darkwing, who is just this single Batman type character in, you know, St. Canard, you know, and he's got to protect this girl now because, you know, her grandfather has ostensibly died, been killed for his secret, for the weapon. And it's, it was actually pretty dark considering, you know, the Disney lineup.
It was, because it was a different thing. I think we talked about it before when we...
Still funny, but dark.
Yeah, when we talked about Darkwing Duck before, like, the music got a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we had mentioned the urban feel to it. It was a total 90s type song.
Yep.
And it was a theme song, just like DuckTales. Everyone would be like, woo!
Yeah.
And in certain songs, it just hit, and Darkwing was another one of those.
I am the terror that flaps in the night.
Yeah, and he would do the lisp sometimes. And,
yes.
And it worked. And then later on in the shows, as we'll get into it, like they reference Duckburg.
Yeah,
you know,
they're in the same world.
Yeah, so, and they're not far apart.
No,
you know, because there are cameos from time to time.
Well, and even Launchpad, who is his foil, and he becomes his foil in his pilot in this, is directly from DuckTales.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this started originally, and we talked about this in a previous episode, but Darkwing Duck was originally a James Bond type spoof pilot that they were doing. Tad Stones, I think, was the show creator, and at first, you know, they denied, like, oh no, it was a different thing. But no, this is a spinoff of DuckTales, because the 00 Duck episodes of DuckTales where Launchpad plays kind of a James Bond type character, falling into intrigue. Were meant kind of to, he was supposed to turn that into its own thing, but it didn't happen because, of course, you know, Broccoli and the James Bond people weren't going to just let that happen. You know, they were very kind of protective of their brand, and still are. But out of that came Darkwing Duck. They're like, well, let's just do a Batman spinoff then, or a Batman spoof. And that's where it came from. And, you know, his plane is like the Bat plane. You know, it's the head of a duck. You know? And, you know, it was interesting, but it was successful. And the build-up to this show was actually, we've talked about that again before, but the build-up to the show was amazing. You know, you had this countdown day after day. You had these kids dancing, and the number, you know, animated number 9, 8, 7, counting down each day until this thing actually dropped, which I don't remember that for any other show, but for this one, they really went all out trying to get you really hyped for it. And I think it kind of paid off, though. It was a good show.
X-Men, what was that? Darkwing Duck is on the attack. In 1 week, he hits the street. We're counting down. Go, Darkwing, go. 4, 3, 2, 1. Then Darkwing Duck flies into town. This is where you'll find him at. 1 more week. You got that? Got that?
No, it was, and it's one of those things too where like this is another cartoon that you wish you can go to Disneyland or when Disney stores were open, if there's outlets by you or whatever, that you could find some Darkwing Duck. You don't.
No.
And it's
eBay now.
Yeah, eBay's the only thing, but I mean, like some of it's action. Like I said, this was one of the only cartoons on the block that had actual action figures, because how could you not want Darkwing Duck's plane or his ray gun?
I had his plane.
Yeah,
as a kid, I had the plane. Yeah,
I had the action figures. Who was the one with the plug on his head?
Oh, Megavolt.
I had Megabolt. I had the green guy.
The Poison Ivy guy.
Yeah, he had very much Poison Ivy.
Right.
Yeah,
his Rogues Gallery was definitely a knockoff of Batman's.
Yeah, he had some pretty cool characters, but the cartoon itself I thought was really, really cool. They did not have a setup for that. It was simple because he didn't need pants.
Right.
You know, he had that trench coat
He
type
had
thing.
the double-breasted suit jacket.
Yeah, with a cool freaking fedora or the hat, not the fedora, but the long hat.
The long hat and the turtleneck.
Yeah.
The turquoise turtleneck.
And then he would just like take the kind of cape around his face and then like do his, I am the terror
I am the fly that flaps in your coffee.
Yeah,
he would
always
say
says
something
something
dumb that would ruin the mood, but it was funny.
And there'd be a few times where they would break up his speech because they were like, "It's taking too long."
Yeah, I know. You go on this diatribe, and they're like, "Come on, dude, you're right there." Yeah. But the great thing about the pilot too is it really has this family dynamic to it. This kind of just like Batman, and I think we talked about in the previous episode as well. This girl kind of is like an anthropomorphized version of the Robin that was in the Dark Knight Returns comics. A redhead, a girl who is Robin, and because she's his Robin. She helps with cases and stumbles into intrigue and all that. And, I guess Launchpad is kind of his Alfred in a way. So, you had that great sense of adopted family that came in, especially in the first episode. And the Rogues Gallery later on was I think one of the greatest Rogues Gallery of any animated cartoon character that was a spoof.
Yeah, he had a lot of bad guys. You're like, okay, this guy's cool. Okay, yeah, he's goofy, but like you said, he serves a purpose.
Yeah.
And same thing with Launchpad. I think when I read a book about this show, one of the guys said that one of the writers said that when they worked on DuckTales that they never utilized Launchpad enough. Like they thought that he was underutilized as a supporting character.
I believe that.
So they felt that he would be perfect to branch off of DuckTales and go to Darkwing.
Yeah.
And dude, it worked.
Yeah.
Like there was a couple characters that they invented that supposedly came from Duckburg that were that fit right into freaking.
Well, Gizmo Duck. Gizmo Duck was also in Darkwing Duck, right? He was like they were jealous of each other. Like they were adversaries. They were both heroes, but they're like, "Oh, I'm better than you. No, I'm better than you."
Yeah, and that was cool because that was funny. That was kind of like, oh, Batman, Superman.
Right. Yeah, because they're both kind of lovable losers. Drake Mallard, who was Darkwing, he's kind of a dork. He's a dork as Darkwing as well.
Their personal life sucked.
Yeah, because then in Gizmo Duck, his life, he lived with his mother in a trailer. I think his mother was this whiny character. It was very, very sitcom-y. Yeah. And it was very funny. But yeah, they're both kind of these dorks outside of their personas as superheroes. And it was just a kind of a fun dynamic when they would go against each other and just kind of get the little digs in here and there.
Oh, yeah.
But no, that was another character, I believe, that could have had his own show. And I don't know why they didn't create a Gizmo Duck show.
Yeah, we brought that up last time.
Yeah.
He definitely could have earned his own show, probably had a third world.
Yeah.
But who was the character? And I brought it up last time and I forgot again. The one that was like Reverse Flash for Darkwing?
Negaduck.
Yeah, that was, again, Negaduck is awesome because... Again,
it was dark.
Yeah, he was very evil.
Yeah.
And he did not care. And there was, I think if you're going to talk about death in that world, he's the one that was closest to bringing actual death.
Right, and mayhem. As opposed to just mayhem and zaniness.
Zaniness, screwing around, chaos. Okay. But he was like, no, I'm going to kill somebody.
I'm going to kill some people. Some people are going to die today. But I I always loved Darkwing Duck. And Darkwing Duck, as we talked about before, was an original character. And it was an original world that they did really well in. But the rest of them were established IP already. And they were just, transformed.
Branching them off.
They modernized them.
Yeah.
But for Darkwing, he was his own thing. He was his own Batman spinoff. He had the Bat Cycle and, his own motorcycle that, resembled resembled the Bat Cycle, and it was kind of a spoof of the 60s show combined with the movies.
I agree.
Because there's a lot of just campiness in it, but it was good.
And I love later on that Launchpad was able to go about his daily routine with nobody noticing that he's riding shotgun in that motorcycle.
He has no mask. Yeah. He's got no mask on.
He never tries one bit to like cover his face.
It's like, yeah, I don't care. It's like,
Launchpad.
It's like, I'm Launch. I am Iron Man. It's like, I am Launchpad. Yeah, but that was a good one. But the pilot was strong, and it's interesting that they were figuring out like, look, let's just make a 2-episode pilot, make it a cliffhanger, but just do 2 episodes instead of 5 or 4 like we've done before, and just kind of get on with the show. And they did that, and it was clean. It was clean, and it worked. And I think by the time it came out in 91 from 87, they'd kind of learned, all the errors of their ways. And they're like, look, it's going to work if it's 2 episodes. We're going to cut this into the show anyway. Let's just make it clean and simple and not overcomplicate the story. And they didn't, and it was a very clean, funny show. Yeah, and their pilots after that, I think, took more from Darkwing's book than they did from Ducktales.
Yeah, because this was a year, I want to say this is a year after Batman, the first movie with Michael Keaton.
2 years.
2 years,
This was the year Batman Returns came out, so anything Batman related was hot.
Was super hot, yeah. Because I remember, like you were saying before, what Tiny Toons had Batman spoofs.
Yep.
And Animaniacs. And so everybody was taking, had short Michael Keaton somewhere.
Oh, dude, that was so funny. It was hilarious how they did that.
They would do a red carpet with Tiny Toons and all these tall people walking by. There's Michael Keaton shorter than Babs.
He would get in there in the Batmobile as Batman and then unzip the costume and be short Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
And Michael Keaton's not all that short. I saw him in person, and he's a good 5'10".
His eyebrows were always like way up.
Way up, dude. I know, but people, but he was a great Batman.
Oh,
that was awesome. A crazy thing. But but anything Batman related was like a hit. So that's why Darkwing, they're like, yeah, let's greenlight it, because who knows if they would have went like a different direction, like, well, 007 didn't work out. Let's create this whole Launchpad world, and without any of the superheroics. I don't think that would have flown. I don't think that would have really done anything.
So. I think with this one, it was a perfect adaptation. And by the way, one of the hardest video games I've ever played is freaking Darkwing Duck.
My God, yeah, I have a Steam Deck, and
pisses me off. I never beat that game.
I have on my Steam Deck, you can emulate a lot of old games, and of course I did the Disney block ones, and I think there's DuckTales 1 and 2, and there's Chip and Dale 1 and 2, but Darkwing only has 1 game, and there's a TailSpin game that's extremely difficult as well, very frustrating.
Same
frustrating, so frustrating. But with the Steam Deck and a lot of like devices that do retro gaming, you can have save states.
Yeah.
So the moment you get to a place and you pass it, you just save it from that point on. Every time you die, you just keep doing it over until you pass it. That's the only way I pass that stinking game.
Yeah, because there's no codes.
Difficult.
There's no codes. Like other games that you could possibly type in when they give you or whatever.
Right.
And there's no saving much on the Nintendo. And the thing I will say is, it's funny you bring that up, because now I think about it, Chip and Dale is made a lot like DuckTales,
right,
where it's like left to right scrolling, and and you have a lot of things you pick up, you move, you throw, you jump. It's basically like a little bit of Super Mario on both of those games, where the other ones you're flying most of the time.
TailSpin was just such a pain. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I couldn't even get into that. But no, Darkwing Duck is a good game.
Yeah.
For NES.
The storytelling's all right.
Yeah. And different companies did the games differently sometimes. That's why Aladdin had a couple of different variations that were kind of different. But Darkwing, the only variation they had was on the TurboGrafx 16. It's a completely different game.
Yeah.
Completely different style. I don't know if you ever played that one.
I have.
It's weird, but I like the NES one better, but it's interesting to see the TurboGrafx 16. I got it working on my emulator just so I could play it. It is a weird game. Yeah. It is a strange game. But, they made money off of that, the marketing, and again, it was a strong pilot for Darkwing Duck. And the second episode kind of wraps it all up very cleanly, but we'll get into that the next time we record in the next episode. But no, Darkwing was a hit, and it was a good, strong pilot. It led to, a good bunch of episodes after that. But it was a good, strong, fun series with a lot of fun in the Rogues Gallery. We're going to start off with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because that meant so much to us growing up.
Absolutely.
We had the toys. We loved the show. And unlike, like we were talking about the Disney block, see, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was still of that 80s era of cartoon making, where it was a show meant to sell toys. This wasn't about story. This was about, light story, heavy on the action, so we can sell the action figures. Transformers was like that. A Polly Pocket was like that. Strawberry Shortcake. A lot of these series that had these toys that had shows, Super Friends. And, they still suffered from that toy-itis. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, unfortunately, is no different because we remember all the toys and the accessories. And, man, did they make a bunch of money off that. But, you specifically had the original comics.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're old enough to get them when they came out. But
no, I got them. I got
years
them
later.
Yeah. Well, I originally started reading them. Funny enough, when I was 10, because my sister was old enough to get them.
Right.
And so when she brought them to me, she actually saw one of the toys that I had borrowed from a friend when I was in elementary school, and it was actually the original red. When they had the original 4 red masks from the cartoon, they hadn't put them in the different colors yet. It was like the very, very first edition, which I wish I still had, but my mom bought me one. And I remember my sister going, "Oh, that's from the comics," and she showed me the comics. I'm like, "Where'd you get that from?" And she's like, "Oh, I got it from my boyfriend." And then I'm looking at it, I'm like, "Oh my God." And this one had, the first time I had read a comic that my parents would let me, but they kind of were very strict and would not let me look at things that had blood, gore, or violence. Yeah. And those were some of the most violent that I had seen. I was like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
So it caught my eye right away, and I started reading through it like crazy, reading it over and over, and I was begging my sister to get more copies, and I finally, she brought me some more copies, and I was just loving it.
Yeah.
Probably the best thing my sister ever did.
But man, yeah. I know, because the first inkling I had of the Ninja Turtles were the toys and the show, and I didn't know the comics till years later, until I got older and could like you come across them when you get older. You're like, what is this? This isn't Ninja Turtles. Yeah. And you find out that the origins are just so much darker in the comics. It was a black and white comic to start with.
Yeah.
It was an indie comic. It wasn't from DC or Marvel or Top Cow or any of those companies.
This was one that just got legs and ran.
Yeah.
It really didn't have any kind of promotion. Mm-mm. It was an off-kilter story. It was almost done as a joke.
They were created as a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like a sort of like they were trying to make a joke as serious as possible.
Right.
Like that didn't make sense. And for whatever reason, these guys, Eastman and Laird, it worked.
Yeah.
And it was greenlit to their surprise. And the funny thing is, it was just way too violent to be a cartoon. So they had to dumb it the hell down.
Yep.
And once, I guess some genius, because it wasn't them, decided, hey, we can market this. If drawn right, this could be a hit and we could make a ton of money.
Yeah. And
they sold their soul to Playmates. And basically Playmates was like, okay, like going to your point of creating a cartoon or episode or a character just for the fact to create another toy.
Yeah.
Once they established the Ninja Turtles, I'm telling you, Ty, those were like the hottest thing out there because they were unlike any other toy at the time.
Yeah.
And so like once the
Turtles, there were Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, and at the time ninja movies were awesome.
Yeah.
So like you wanted to see fighting, so you saw Turtles, like the hardcore fans knew of it and they're like, "Wait, this is cool, but it's not what we like, but it's kind of there because they took from because the movie would later take from the cartoon and the comics. Mm-hmm. But at the time this was off kilter all the way. This was set to be more lackadaisical, funny. Whereas the original comic books, you'll see match the first movie at least, to almost to a T. But man, I mean, when those toys came out, bro, once everyone had the Shredder, the Splinter, the Foot Soldier, Krang, and the main turtles in their just regular weapons, because the weapons were cool too.
Swords, ninja stars.
Yeah, now it's just like okay. We got those toys. What's next?
Yeah.
And they started to just create
all these waves
of mutants and different characters that's
Chrome Dome,
Yosaki Yojimbo, the rabbit that was only in one episode. But dude, if you look online, if you're a collector like me, Yosaki Yojimbo is one of the like popular characters of the brand, but he was only in one episode.
Right. Yep, that's how powerful the show was. I mean, and that's what the toy makers, they wanted that, and it was, God, Playmates really made a killing, because I think the original comic was done in 84, right? What is it?
Well, it was 84 to 86.
84 to 86, and the show was 2 years after that. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles debuted in 88, right?
Yeah, 87 or 88.
87, 88. No, I think you're right. And it's, 87.
Yeah.
So a year after the comic ended, and it's probably because they bought them out
Yeah,
to
they
make
gave them
the show.
Yeah, they gave them like almost the entire IP. So they that's why people think, man, Eastman and Laird must be billionaires. It's like, really, Playmates is still making the money. And to go to that point, do you know, like, I can give you the in their peak years for 4 years how much they made in just toys.
Okay.
Just
Before
toys.
we get into the episode, let's go.
In just toys.
Yeah,
Okay,
I wanna see this.
because remember, this is not counting, because they were everywhere. They were on candy. You brought up that the
Pies.
the
little
pies,
hand pies, yeah.
toothbrushes, all that stuff, right? So the 4 years that they were just on top of the world, the very first year of toy sales, 60 million worldwide.
Wow.
$60 million.
Wow.
Then the second year they made.
What year is this?
This was in 89.
89.
Yeah. 90 was 120 million.
They doubled that.
Peak was 180.
God.
And then the fourth year before it crashed, before all those other IPs came along that kind of like, and they were kind of running its course, it was 160 still.
Wow.
So you're talking about almost like $500 million or over $500 million. Almost $1 billion. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I mean, dang, dude. I mean, that's a lot of cash just on toys. Yeah, but in its heyday, man, I mean, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing something Ninja Turtle.
Oh, dude, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
my mom remembers too. Our moms remember.
Yeah. I mean, I had shirts. I had a hat. I had all the toys that I can get my hands on. It was so cool. But I think before we jump too far ahead, I know we'll get into the episode right now, but I have to mention this though. One of the seasons to market the most toys, where I think they made the most money, I think there was something like 30 something episodes for one season. Like they just and you could tell they were poorly drawn. The
quickly done.
Yeah, the quickly done. The stories were just crap, but people bought it, and there was a new person in each one.
That's an interesting concept too. Just the show surviving because the toys are selling so well.
Yeah.
And then, kids want to watch the show because they've got the toys and the toys are interesting. It's just this whole cycle, because it was not I hate to say this. It was we loved it. We loved Ninja Turtles. It was not a well-produced or written show.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't, I mean, in comparison to a lot of other shows.
For the time period, yeah.
Yeah, it was almost like the Super Friends. It was like a step up from Super Friends in a way. And, as a kid, you don't know any better. But, as you get older, you're like, oh, okay. That was interesting. What kind of drugs was I on as a toddler? Jeez. And look, it was charming. There were very charming elements of it. But I think because we rewatched the pilot, and we just rewatched it today, it's, you kind of look back and you're like, oh, especially when you have a vast knowledge of other shows, especially when you get into the 90s, Batman the Animated Series, and all the effort that went into that and the quality in that. And then you look at something else.
How they took it seriously?
Yeah, they took it seriously. And then you look at something else, a show that's just based on selling the damn toys.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, that's why. That's why it's a well-remembered, or that's why, it either did so well or didn't do so well. But with the pilot, it was, of course, a 5-part pilot, but the first one was called Turtle Tracks, of course, where we meet, the Turtles meet April O'Neil, we meet the Turtles, we meet everybody, Splinter, we meet Shredder.
Get the origins
in, which were kind of interesting. Some of it was drawn in an interesting way, at least conceptually.
We find out, because obviously, if you don't know, James Avery from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Uncle Phil is Shredder.
Yep.
We find out that he has a fascination with CCTV.
Right? Because this guy's got cameras everywhere in this episode. He's watching everything the Turtles are doing in the sewers. Like, how did you get a cameraman down there? It's like The Office.
He's in that room, like just the one room the entire episode.
Yeah, because he's in his Technodrome, technically.
Yeah,
but you don't know that yet. But he's in there watching everybody. He's watching all the Turtles, and like, this guy's got an eye on everybody. He is Big Brother. I mean, he is, he's the eye in the sky.
He kind of reminded me of Morgan Freeman from Batman. Remember, he was watching all those cameras in
Right.
the room.
That's right. Shredder had his own back computer.
He sure
That's
did.
amazing. They got it from the same. Lucius Fox is like,
There you go.
he's making them for everybody.
Crossover.
I'm telling you, he's playing both ends. Oh man, that dirty scientist. But no, it was very interesting. But yeah, it's funny because you have a black man playing an Asian character. There's all kinds of wrong in different ways, but you're kind of like, is it though? Is it like, when you go that way with it, you're like, okay, I'll take that. It's fine.
Exactly. There was a couple other goofy parts in there that we caught. There was some stuff that wouldn't fly today.
No.
And the one thing I noticed too, which I think we'll see a lot in the first season, is there's a lot of wrong voices for certain characters. Like you'll have Raphael voicing Donatello or Donatello voicing Michelangelo.
I think that's because the characterizations were off.
Yeah.
So, in writing, like if you're writing 4 characters that are basically, they look almost the same, visually you have to really create a character. And I think the writers were writing them all the same. They all went, yay, over the same things. Maybe Raphael was a little more sarcastic, but they were all kind of sarcastic.
Correct.
And they all kind of had their points, especially in the pilot. But, I remember like in the pilot episode, the first episode, Turtle Tracks, they mentioned pizza and Raphael goes, yay. And I'm like, that's not something that character would do.
No, I mean, he'd be like, yeah, let's get some pizza, but he wouldn't be like, yay.
I know, he was the angry one.
Yeah.
But then, and Leo really wasn't the leader at that point in the, it was just kind of, again, you were right. The voices feel off, but I think that's mainly because they were written so unilaterally. There wasn't a lot of dimension given to their characters because it was mostly about them cracking jokes every once in a while. And, that took up a lot of space and you don't get to tell a lot of story in that.
Yeah, and I like about that episode because it does mirror the comic book, the original. But in the original comics, that wasn't the first comic. That's not how they come about. That's not how there's more of a detailed background. But they rushed it. But as far as the movie, kind of mirrored that episode in ways when the Foot Clan approach. Well, it's not the Foot Clan, but it's Bebop and Rocksteady with their street thugs approaching April, and then the Turtles saving the day. And so there's a lot of that works from the movie, but I thought, man, there's some parts that are cool in here, but boy, did they dumb this down.
Yeah,
and they were more
comics.
They were more focused on comedy, even when they were in peril.
Yeah,
they were telling a joke.
This it's funny too because we were talking about this off camera, and you mentioned the fact that when Playmates bought the comics, it went total kid friendly.
Oh yeah,
this isn't a new phenomenon because I was telling you about Superman or the Adventures of Superman from the 1950s with George Reeves, and the first 2 seasons of that show were in black and white. And, it's famously, his famous light colored suit was different because in black and white, you have to shoot colors differently than you do on color film. And the first 2 seasons were written really well. It wasn't written as a kid's show. And if you watch the first 2 seasons, they're actually good TV episodes of a show that just happen to have Superman in them. And, especially for the early 50s, we're talking 1951, 1952, this show was actually pretty damn good. And there was one episode specifically in the second season where he has to stop this guy from getting the electric chair or the gas chamber in California or somewhere in the States. And he's the guy that played the priest in Little House on the Prairie. The first preacher.
The guy with the glasses?
Yeah, the one before him, I think.
Oh, okay.
The kind of the older bald one. But, the funny thing is, they play, but Superman's like, oh my God, I got to save this guy. And, he's trying to go within the parameters of the law. And it's a real nail biter of an episode. And it's really good. But then what happened was when the 3rd season came around, then Kellogg's, bought them. Kellogg started giving them a bunch of money. So I went to color and the storylines were completely kidified. And that's when it got extremely campy and more childlike. And the costume changed. It was an actual red and blue costume. Looked great. But, the same thing that happened with the Turtles is once you have people buying into it or buying the IP or they're going to produce shows on it and they're putting up the money, things change because then with money comes control.
Correct.
So the same thing happened with the Ninja Turtles. It went from this dark, gritty comic book into this like very brightly colored kids show.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's like, the funny thing is like in the 80s they were doing that though. Like you take dark properties like RoboCop and you make it a kids show. Swamp Thing, make it a kids show. Because why? In the 80s they were selling toys like crazy. RoboCop toys, Swamp Thing toys, all that stuff. So, that was just kind of the rule of the day. But with Ninja Turtles specifically, it became this huge phenomenon. RoboCop and Swamp Thing and all the rest of the adaptations never did Ninja Turtle money.
No.
Never. Like, they may have sold some stuff, but they didn't sell much. Ninja Turtles were a juggernaut. And this show just was kind of like an afterthought to the toys.
It was. And I brought it up in another episode. Like, Burger King had a deal where they would give you a toy, and then you could also, when you go over there, buy a VHS tape that had 2 episodes of the Ninja Turtles early seasons on it for like $1.99. Man, you know how much those are now online, dude? Oh my God. And you're talking about, okay, no one watches VHS, but as a collectible, nostalgia. I mean, oh my God. And then on those, you had the preview for the movie.
Yeah.
So that was the whole thing, you know, take this home. You had an extended version of the preview of the movie, which is, I still think, one of the best movies of all time. I'm still waiting for a live action. We talked about that, but getting back to this episode, it was the setup for what was to come, because the toys were all, and then that was a crazy thing about this too. The toy line was launched before the cartoon, and the toy line already had a following. So when you got the cartoon behind it, it magnified. Because like I said, I had my first few toys. The neighbors had their first few toys before the cartoon hit. And when the cartoon hit, I mean, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing Ninja Turtles. I mean, it was everywhere.
Right. Yeah. And it lasted that way for many, many years. But the first episode was very simple. Like we said before, you know, you had April O'Neil is going to get jumped by thugs. You had a lot of male chauvinist characters that were her co-workers who didn't care about her.
And wait till later on, the boss and her, the cameraman or whatever, the producer, they say some really mean crap the first 2 seasons.
So this is an interesting show for those reasons. And, you know, those guys, you know, they don't care that she's been kidnapped and gone for a day. They don't care. And the turtles in the pilot kidnap her because they're like, well, now you found out where we lived because we saved you. You can't leave. Have fun staying with us forever. That was Michelangelo's. He's like, hey, I have an idea. Like, dude, she could stay with us just forever. And like, dude, and the other guys are like, no, we can't do that.
And then she actually says, no, I'm going to leave now. And Donatello puts his bow out there. No, you're not.
No, you're not. It's like, dude, this is hella creepy, man. I'm telling you, these Ninja Turtles and this rat that's given her sewer sushi. Sewer sushi is not a euphemism. Sewer sushi is actually what she got. He wanted her to calm down, so he gave her some food. It was actual sushi.
You know, they have penicillin for that,
right? But it's an actual thing in the episode. And then finally, they have to try and track down... they get into a predicament where they're in this building because they're trying to track down, you know...
the source of where Shredder's coming from, or Rokusaki.
Exactly. Who is, you know, connected to Splinter. He actually is the one that set Splinter up back in the day to where he had to be kicked out of the original Foot Clan, you know, back in their youth.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the Turtles go out with April O'Neil to go find this guy in this building that gets flooded. It's like a horror. It's like an escape room.
Yeah, and it turns into one big water fountain only to explode into a bunch of shards of glass. Which as a kid, I didn't understand, and watching it back...
And as an adult, we don't understand either.
It's even a bigger enigma. I'm like, what the hell just happened?
That makes less sense now. Oh, my God. And apparently the Technodrome where the Shredder is, we'll find out it's the Technodrome. He's somewhere under the building, underground, somehow watching this from afar. And
he's right below with the city.
Right.
It's crazy.
Funny how nobody noticed that construction or needed to get those permits. But, and then, you know, they survive all that. And then their journey continues. But so far, that's the first episode, Turtle Tracks, where we get introduced to the main characters of the show. And not all of them either, because later on you have Casey Jones and you have a plethora of characters who are really fun action figures later on.
My God, there's got to be at least 200 to 200 characters, maybe, total, if you count the Ninja Turtles that morph into other stuff and other... I mean, it's just so many characters.
So many characters, so many toys, so many episodes. But we'll get more on that in the next one as we track down part 2 of all the shows we're talking about.
last thing I got on this, before Pokemon, it was like, or Pokemon's catchphrase is "Gotta catch 'em all."
Oh, you'd have to get all the Ninja Turtles.
Playmates was "You gotta buy 'em all."
Gotta buy them all. Your parents were like, "Oh, why?
Yeah, not again.
Not again."
There's
I
a
know. I was
new
like,
line.
"Don't you have this turtle?" But he's got a hat.
This one you could pour mutagen on him, and he transforms. I had that one.
I had the transforming one too. He transforms into a turtle because it all folds into the turtle shell.
Yeah.
You pop him open and do
Had
it.
all 4.
Oh my! I had the one. I think I had Leo. He was the one I would go to because my mom's like, "You're not getting all of them."
I finagled my way to get those. That's one thing I could do.
Oh man, the accessories, the vehicles were a lot of. Anyway,
Yeah,
we're going. That's a rabbit
Yeah,
hole.
it's
We don't want to
another
get
episode
into.
altogether.
But they had great toys. But another show that kind of had great toys that we're going to talk about right now. But
Simple
it was
toys.
But it was a great show. First and foremost, is going to be in our segment "Running Home After School," where we're going to start tackling Batman the Animated Series episode by episode. And now we're going to start out with On Leather Wings, which aired September 6th, 1992.
This is my favorite cartoon of all time.
Yeah, show.
Yeah, cartoon show of all time.
Yeah,
I mean,
same.
because
Same.
it's sentimental, not sentimental, but like sort of like a movie. You know, if you were to say to me, yeah,
cinematic.
See, I couldn't say it. It took
Cinematic.
it took 2 of us to say it.
But we got it.
Yeah, I'll just say this. Earlier in the episode, I said 1937, cartoon me going to a theater. Yes, I would do that for a Disney short. Boy, I'd be pre-gaming it.
Yeah.
For a Batman, the animated series, I would, if you said, hey, man, it's not coming on TV, it's only going to be in theaters. Take my money, please. This was a beautiful show. I just altogether, man. I mean, I'm speechless at times.
Take my money. Just take the money.
Yes.
No, this was a great show, and you're right, cinematic, because they set out to make each episode a mini movie, and that was the goal. That's what Bruce Timm and all the rest of the crew that created this show, that was their goal, and it was going to be unlike any other superhero show that had been on the air to date.
Yeah, there's nothing to it.
No,
Nothing.
because with this show, they wanted it. The studio wanted it to look more like the Fleischer's Superman from the '40s, which were highly produced theatrical short cartoons, and they weren't heavy on story necessarily. They weren't necessarily interconnected either. But it's where Superman learned to fly, because they're like him prancing around, like leaping tall buildings, looks really weird. So can we just make him fly? And they're like, sure. So that's where Superman got his ability to fly. But it was just a richly produced show and had great dynamics in terms of the art. And the producers of Batman the Animated Series, they're like, yeah, sure, we'll try that. And it came out magnificently.
Yeah, so you're saying that Turtles was very close to how they drew Batman? No, I was kidding. Not even close.
Yeah, it's a little far afield, but
Yeah.
it was, but it's interesting seeing the juxtaposition of the two, watching one right after the other, because that's what we did. We watched Ninja Turtles, and then we watched Batman the Animated Series, this episode to review, and boy, back to back, Ninja Turtles just seems like a crank car, one of those like Model T Fords.
Jalopy.
And then Batman the Animated Series, that episode On Leather Wings, seems like a Ferrari in comparison. It's amazing.
Oh, it is. I mean, like, forgetting the fact that, like, you got Danny Elfman doing the music. You got, like,
Shirley Walker as well.
Yeah, you had the voice actors that were freaking amazing. You had the drawings, like you said, you had Bruce Timm. These guys are taking tremendous risks, but at the time they had Fox behind them, who was trying to get their, they're trying to compete with the big bad other networks.
Yeah.
And so they were willing to take on a project like this, and they were willing to be taking on what is it called, the X-Men later, and other shows that tested the true
boundaries of the form.
Yeah. And so Batman was like, they were like, hey, we're going to give you this IP, run with it, see what you could do with it. And they like talk about the drawings and how and how dark it was and why it was dark.
Yeah, they all the backgrounds were done on black paper. They're like, we're going to try this. These men were artists. They went to school for it. They'd been working on they weren't new to it either, to the genre, because they had worked on Tiny Toon Adventures for years. So they'd been doing this. And, they knew what was coming. And again, like we were saying earlier about Darkwing Duck, anything Batman related was on fire at the moment because of Tim Burton. We have Tim Burton to thank for a Batman the Animated Series because of how unbelievably successful those two films were. Because the one thing about this show is that the only request the studio made, Warner Brothers made, to the producers of Batman the Animated Series, is to make the Penguin look like, and this wasn't a request, they told them to do this, to make the Penguin look more like the movie Penguin, the Danny DeVito Penguin that was going to be in Batman Returns. So they did that.
Pretty close.
And they got him close. All right, they didn't want to go overboard with it because they didn't want him to look, too scary for kids, but they did it. And that's why in the revamp episodes, they went back to the original design that they wanted, which was a simpler, more comic accurate version of Oswald Cobblepot. But they were very serious about it, and they wanted to make mini movies, and that's why just the camera in this series, it tracks Batman as he is being pulled through the skies, past huge vehicles, the police blimps, and we track and follow with him, and in such complex ways that really weren't done on animated shows. They weren't even done in a lot of live action movies, but they were doing it on this show because that was the quality that went into it, the creativity, the vision of it was very dynamic, and it really paid off because this flows so well.
Yeah, and the title cards that you've always talked about are just visual beauty because it encapsulates what the episode could be, and it gives you that comic book feel before you jump into the opening scene. Like in the opening scene, they showed the police blimp, they showed the freeways being packed, the noir feel. The cars are 40s, but kind of future. On some of the cars in later episodes, they have what you have today, where you have GPS screens, or you can type on a screen that's like a Tesla type thing in a car. And it's not just in the Batmobile; it's in the regular cars.
That's right.
Yeah. And then the clothes, everyone's got the fedora. They got the
suits,
the suit or the trench coat.
Yeah, the women are all in dresses.
Yeah,
like 40s knockout pinup dresses.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. And then what they did too was they didn't draw everyone cute and sexy. You had fugly looking people. It was
you had some fatties. Men and women. It's okay.
You had some really and what me and you. I think rewatching this episode, we were awestruck by the first time that you sit down as a kid in front of Fox Television to watch Batman.
On Fox Kids.
Yeah, just getting through that opening scene of the explosion at the bank, Batman fighting with the characters, the title card. The first scene is not Batman. It's Man-Bat, the silhouette. Yeah. That was awesome.
Because in this episode specifically, that's the great thing about the techniques they used. They didn't just show it to you. Like, oh, here we are. And you kind of had to wait for it. And you had to wait to see Batman. Like you said, it was kind of a red herring. You see something swinging through the air. It's not Batman. Like you said, it's Man-Bat. It's the focus of the episode. And then when you get to Batman, it's a great build up to it, like in the Batmobile, the Batcave, and all that. Because it's all there, but it's just not, you have to wait a little bit for it.
And you get the best thing that if a true Batman fan can appreciate is the detective side of Batman. Like right away, he's at the crime scene, finding stuff that the cops didn't.
Well, let's set this episode up. Yeah,
let's do it.
You're absolutely right. This episode is about a giant bat being seen flying over Gotham. Later attacks a guard at a pharmaceutical company.
Tell him what the guard's doing though. That's hilarious.
The guard is an actor recording an audition.
Yeah, it's so ironic. It's awesome.
And it's Richard Mall. It's the guy who plays Two-Face or Harvey Dent in this episode later on. And that's another thing about this show. The villains weren't fully developed at first. You got to grow with them.
That's true.
So Harvey Dent later on, he's District Attorney Harvey Dent, but he's got rage issues. He's got multiple personality issues, and he goes to a therapist. It's in a kid's show. And then what happens is...
He winds up breaking up with his wife.
Yeah, and then he becomes Two-Face. But it's just
he's flipping a coin in this one.
Exactly. So they're like you said, like with Shere Khan in TailSpin, there's like little nuggets.
Yeah.
And there's like Easter eggs in that one too, because you know what's coming. It's kind of like it's foreshadowing is what it is.
Absolutely.
And it's done so well in this. And you got the setup of the world, but what was happening, and that helps in every aspect of making just a rich environment. But Batman is of course suspected because he already exists in this world, and this isn't a day one story. And of course, he has to find out what's really going on. So he, contacts his friends. He finds evidence, like you said, when that guard is attacked. He finds hair follicles. He collects them. He has his gadgets that he uses because he's a scientist.
That
as well.
red spray.
Yeah, the red spray, which is like you said, it's like they're kind of luminol. So that world's luminol, Batman's luminol. He has all this scientifically grounded tech. It wasn't just like Batman magic. It's like he waves his bat wand and then he knows. He's got this gear that he built. It shows his intellect, and he's not just about beating people up. This isn't about a fight necessarily. This is about him using his brain as a character and trying to find out who this character is. He tracks it down to Langstrom, these people that are in they work at a zoo. I think that he's aware of is Bruce Wayne.
To take care of bats and rare animals.
Exactly. And then, as the story progresses, it isn't who you think it's going to be, because you think it's the old man who's kind of a bitter loner,
shifty eyes,
and you're like, oh yeah, this guy's definitely the villain.
I sure did. I was like, oh yeah, that guy's a bad guy.
And it ends up being his son-in-law.
Yeah.
Instead, and you're like, oh my god, because he's doing this research on creating like a super soldier formula almost, and it ends up turning him into this creature, the Man Bat, and he goes off at night and just kind of terrorizes the town, and he's this big 9-foot monster bat that Batman has to track down, because and it's you don't know that's the complexity of the story too, is you don't know what's going on until Batman knows, and it's just this big thing. And there's some darker, scarier kind of almost like classic Universal horror moments when you find out who the real villain is, and it's like the Invisible Man when you find out he's insane and all that. And it's so great when Batman finally it happens to Batman, because with all his intellect and everything, he still gets caught off guard, because he's there with Langstrom. He's there with the one we originally thought was the Man Bat, his son-in-law, and he transforms in front of him, and it's like one of those oh shit moments, like here we go. And then he makes his escape, and you see him transform right in front of him with this creepy laugh, and then he just tries to make his escape flying out of there. Batman, of course, gets his bat rope and lassos on and gets. And I always thought this was really cool, because Langstrom as Man Bat hits the window and just shatters it, and then Batman gets pulled through, but he also shatters a little bit of it too.
Yeah,
I thought that little attention to detail about additional glass breaking, because it just wasn't a perfect pull through the glass, the hole that's already there. Batman gets beat up a little even in that.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of parts in there, like the part where they're on the scaffolding on the building.
Yeah.
Like where he kind of he's holding on, and you're thinking, okay, yeah, Batman's got him now. And then he pulls down, and he pulls Batman with him.
Yeah.
You have the argument with Commissioner Gordon and Harvey Bullock. They're arguing. You get that dynamic. They're setting up so much. And then the fact that, one of the rogue SWAT team guys, throws a grenade in there, in an explosive area. And Batman's first reaction is, oh crap. And he takes the guy that was just trying to get him, and he pulls him out and saves the SWAT team member.
Yeah.
And then he stands him up right in front of Commissioner Gordon and Bullock, and I'm like, that's pretty dope.
Yeah, he didn't have to say a word.
Yeah.
He's like, I just saved your guy.
Yeah.
Stop throwing bombs at me.
That was really, really cool.
I'm trying to save us, you morons. Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of cool scenes, like you said, in the one where he's wrapping around the blimp. I mean,
oh my God. When we rewatched that, I had forgotten so, because as a kid, you don't really pay attention to a lot of that. It's like part of the episode, but you don't really extract that from it and go that's a complicated camera move. I mean, it's drawing, but you're drawing in perspective and foreshortening, and things are getting bigger and smaller as you go past them, and they really did a great job of Batman being pulled through the skies and right around these objects, almost hitting these objects. And he actually does hit the glass booth. Yeah. And as we were listening to the commentary, Bruce Timm comments on that.
He's like,
this is one of his favorite parts, because Batman's face, because he's getting, pulled through the air because he's hanging on to Man Bat. He doesn't want to let him go. And, Batman just, boom, cracks the glass, too.
And it's showing the sheer power, because at the end, it takes him hitting a freaking brick wall at full blast.
Yeah, because Batman has to kind of maneuver him like a plane.
Yeah.
Like the flaps, and he has to maneuver him into a concrete wall.
Yeah, and then finally when he headbutts the damn wall, you can see that, Bruce didn't come out of this one unscathed. He's actually bleeding, and he can't leave the bat there. He actually is like, okay, I'm going to take care of this myself, and he wraps him up and takes him with him.
And develops an antigen and then cures Langstrom.
Because
he does come back later.
Yeah.
Let's just say in future episodes there might be a resurgence of the Man Bat.
Yeah, might revisit this guy.
Right? But yeah, and again, scientific mind. He in that show, it proved that it wasn't just him beating people up. It wasn't Arkham Asylum, it's where he just beats the crap out of everybody. Not that I love those games, but this show, it showed a different side of it, and I think underpowering him is a very important thing. Just like with Superman, the animated series in '96 that the same team created. They joked about, at the beginning, like, how do we write for Superman? Because, the same thing when they were doing the Death of Superman comics in like the late 80s, early 90s, when they were planning it, they're like, how do you kill a guy that can, destroy the world by listening too hard? Because that was in the comics. He could do that. So they pared him down. And some of the greatest comics they'll always tell you is Superman gets a lot of hate for this, and it's undeserved because I'm a huge Superman fan. But the greatest usually events with the Justice League and the comics throughout the decades have been when Superman's off in another world saving the civilization, so they had to do it on their own. But with Batman and Superman, when they pared them down and made them weaker and more vulnerable, like they did with Superman in '96 in the 1996 animated series, it made him easier to write for. And I think with Batman, showing him getting hurt, showing him getting jacked up because he's just human, and having to come up with clever ways to survive, which he does throughout this series, just really makes him such an endearing, interesting. It makes him an interesting character. It's so much more interesting when he has to fight to win, and not just fight to fight, but just come up with clever ways, use a combination of things just to survive. And this show showed him barely surviving most of the encounters he was up against.
And that's the cool thing as we'll go along in these Batman episodes, or maybe you remember, the listener or watcher of this episode of the Batman the Animated Series, is there was slow parts. There was an awful lot of slow parts in these episodes, but they built the story and they were necessary. And as a kid, and even as a kid, I appreciated those and didn't complain about them. Yeah. Like, well, where's my action? Right. I need some jokes. Right. You didn't need that because it was building the story. And so today, as an adult, I'm like, hey, I appreciate that. Like, I like the fact that they put an onus and an importance on building the story. And writing it in such a way that it's a need, not a want by them. Right. And it's a need for us to understand the whole thing. Right. Like, it just worked perfect.
It did. And in this episode specifically, it showcased a lot of different things.
Correct. Which threw a lot of people off because when you think Batman, you think Joker.
Right.
You think you're going to start with something like that, or you're going to start with his parents were shot in the back alley.
Right.
There was none of that.
Yep. There's a joke about that too online. It was like, oh yeah, his dad was kind of like, like, I'm going to go through a dark alley in a seedy neighborhood wearing my finest clothes and my wife wearing her best pearls.
As a billionaire.
Nothing's going to happen to me.
I'm good.
I'm good. See Bezos do that. But I'm just saying. It's
I don't think there's what's the other guy with the Teslas? What's his? I forget.
Musk.
Yeah, I don't see Musk doing that either.
No, well, he just holds his kids in front of him. That's kind of what he does. Sorry, but hey, look at my little child.
Like and subscribe. Yay!
Even Elon, you're welcome to like and subscribe.
There you go.
No, but with this episode, they showed so many aspects of his character that weren't just action. They were just very important and very strong indicators of what the show was going to be about. And like you said, the slower moments, they did it right. They knew how to work with silence and work with atmosphere.
Correct.
And that was a great thing about, from the background paintings to whatever it was, to the cell animation, everything served a purpose. The angle of the cameras, what they were trying to do. They were trying to make it like a movie in 22 minutes,
Yeah, and see, like, just with the music, as we'll talk about in the next episode and other episodes and things like this, but the music in the title card was likely going to be the music for the protagonist or for a big moment moving forward in that particular episode, which was brilliant.
No, it's true. And when you were saying the title card, talking about the title card earlier, my mind went in two different ways. It's almost like with that title card, it's like the cover of a comic book.
Correct.
And it's like you're opening this episode, you're opening this comic book, but it was also with the music and everything, especially like with Clayface and Feet of Clay and those episodes later on. It's like it's the soul of the show. There's something about it that's just, it encompasses the emotional beat of the episode.
I got to go on a side note on another episode that we'll get on down the road, but remember with the mayor's son with the Joker episode?
Yep.
That was one of the creepiest title cards because the boy is holding the hand of a really sinister.
Be a clown, wasn't it?
Be a clown, and the music that went along with that, because that's how they can rope you in.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very effective.
Yeah.
The only one of the original 86 or 85 episodes that did not have a title card was the Laughing Fish.
Oh,
if you notice, that one is
was a swinging
it's just
fish.
a swinging fish.
Oh.
Yeah, I guess they ran out of time because in the commentary for this, Bruce Timm said that they stopped doing it in the show when they started doing like the Robin episodes of The Adventures of Batman and Robin. They just ran out of time. It was just too time consuming to do that. But it was such a great touch. But if you look back, they also did that in Tiny Toon Adventures, and the Animaniacs had that too. They all had title cards, and it was kind of a thing in animation then.
Makes sense, yeah.
And even Super Friends kind of had it, even though they weren't very different. They really, in this book here, Batman Animated, I wish this is very out of print. I wish they would revise it and put a lot more stuff in it. But they have a fold out page, like basically 4 pages, where it has all the title cards that they did. And they're beautiful, their artwork. But again, it's like a wonderful introduction to the soul of the episode. It's like the cover of a comic book that you're opening and reading, and the first page is right behind it. And with the great thing about On Leather Wings, too, is that it set all that up from the beginning. And it had great executed art, but great executed episode, from the writing to the camera work, and everything was just so rich and well done.
Absolutely.
It set up the whole world. You know what I mean? And it also set up the fact that you didn't necessarily know what you were going to get. You didn't know if you were going to get the Joker, Two-Face, or some one-off character, which they had a few of that were just very heartfelt episodes, like Underdwellers I bring up because that was such a weird episode.
But a good one.
But a good one.
Memorable.
And all of them were. And this is just the first of many that really set the stage for what this show was going to be. And it wasn't just a kid's action show. This was an immortalizing of the Batman mythos.
Dude, my mom and dad watched this with me. You know what I mean? Like we would sit down and watch this as a family. It was great. But last thing I got on this is one of the few episodes that you don't get either a flash of lightning or rain. Because most of the episodes in Gotham's very stormy.
Yeah, a lot of flu there. There's a lot of sickness. Yeah.
But you did see the silhouette of a beautiful background.
Right.
Like this one was more darker than future episodes, but the silhouette and the what Bruce Timm brought out in the commentary, and we noticed from other episodes, just a beautiful artwork.
Yeah.
I mean, it was awesome.
It was clean, and that's why we love it. But this has been another episode of TNT the K-Cow Kids. We're going to wrap this up and get into the next episodes that we have to catch up on and review. But thank you so much for tuning in once again. I'm Ty Justice.
I'm Todd Fox.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.